David. It's a fascinating report. There's lots we can get into, but of course things like this don't happen without the help of my other panellists here, from Martin, Maria and David. So let's hear what they've got to say on it. First of all, from England's Economic Heartland, Martin Tugwell.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been working with David and the study team at the Reece Jeffries Road Fund on Major Roads Network, Major Roads for the Future report. And it's a real pleasure to be able to come up and stand and talk about how we're going to take this forward, because as a building block moving forward, it's absolutely fundamental. What I thought I'd do is just start off by just giving a little bit of context of what the Strategic Alliance is about, who we are and where we're coming from. And if we start with the what, because it's quite often important to think about when you're thinking about structures, what is it that drives, what is it that brought the political leadership in this part of the country together to actually think about what do we need to do differently. And it was about recognizing that strategic issues need to be looked at strategically. It's very simple. And we kind of touch on it from time to time with policy and strategy, but we sometimes forget that actually we need that continuity, that longer-term vision, that longer-term framework within which things can happen more locally. So that was what was driving the Strategic Alliance leaders when they started their idea about 2 years ago, starting building on the concept. And what was driving them at the main part of it was a recognition that success in the future was going to be very much linked to the economy. Successful in an economy would generate wealth, would generate income, would actually generate the success that allows investment in those services which support others perhaps in society who need a bit of support, a bit of comfort in terms of services. So it's driving the economy, infrastructure, and it's important to recognize that the leaders were coming at this from a perspective that whilst transport is an important driver, it's by no means the only part of the strategic infrastructure agenda that they need to focus on. It's the whole gambit of it. And where they were coming from is we need to be clear about what we're trying to achieve. We need to be making faster, more agile decisions. We need to be thinking about how we can do things more cost effectively, how we can drive out efficiencies in terms of cut time and cost from the delivery process. And if we can do that, and if, as David says in the report, we can provide that longer-term framework, guess what? We can actually start to put together the clarity and the certainty that not only helps us in our supply chain in terms of delivery, but equally and perhaps more importantly, gives the confidence to the private sector investors who are actually going to be delivering on our economy for the future. So that's a bit about what drove the political leaders to start to come together. Who are they? Where are we? It's broadly the arc from Cambridgeshire across to Oxfordshire. 9 local authorities working closely with 3 local enterprise partnerships and a 4th. Equally important, we have our delivery partners. So as local transport authorities, we all have major contractors in terms of the local authorities across the heartland. We're talking about Skanska, Ringway Jacobs, Kia WSP, and they have been fundamental to the work we've been doing right from the very start, recognizing that actually to deliver our objectives about faster delivery, more efficient delivery, greater confidence, working hand in glove with our delivery partners, absolutely fundamental. And another fundamental principle here is about the collaboration. I think we've heard a lot already in the first day of this, and no doubt today as well, about the importance of collaboration, redefining how we work, moving beyond partnership to truly collaborative working. As David says, we sometimes get hung up in policy and strategy about who owns what and who's doing what. We need to focus on the strategic outcomes that we're trying to achieve, because that's what's going to set the context within which investors are going to make their decisions. Interestingly, and I'll make a reference to it a few times in these few minutes about the National Infrastructure Commission, colleagues here have had the benefit of the National Infrastructure Commission looking at their part of the country previously. Currently, this part of the country, the heartland, is being looked at by the National Infrastructure Commission. Their interim report came out yesterday, and I'll touch on some of the key messages from there because they're quite pertinent moving forward. So that's the sort of what is it and who are we, but why? Now, let's be honest, the heartland, England's economic heartland, is a pretty successful economy. Something like £92.5 billion GVA. We are a net contributor to the Exchequer, which means we're good not just for the area we're serving, but we're also good for the UK more generally because we're returning investment back to the Treasury. And we've been very successful over the last few years. If you look at the rate of jobs, the economy, and house building, we're delivering quite a bit. But as the National Infrastructure Commission itself identified yesterday, you're starting to see the signs where limits on our infrastructure are acting as a brake on what we can achieve. And like any business, if you've got an economy or a business which you don't invest in, it doesn't go forward, it doesn't stand still, it actually goes backward. And in a world in which we're having to compete globally, then actually making sure we're successful and continue to be successful is really fundamental to the longer-term future for the UK economy. Now, we've always said that there's more potential we can get out of England's economic heartland. What was quite interesting yesterday to see the National Infrastructure Commission saying that if we carried on dealing with and delivering investment and success as we have done in the recent past, then do you know what? By 2050, that 92.5 billion could be increased by about 85 billion by 2050. But what's even more interesting and more challenging is they're saying, if there's a step change in governance, if there's a step change in strategic leadership, if we can join up the economy and planning for infrastructure in the way that David's touched on in his introduction, we could actually generate an additional 163 billion by 2050. So taking that 92.5 billion up to 270, 280 billion pounds. That's an enormous opportunity. And it's quite rightly what drives the Infrastructure Commission when they're saying this is the UK's Silicon Valley. So we're successful. We're starting to see the signs of constraint, but there's a huge opportunity for the future, which is why we set out our immediate priorities in this document, Planning for Growth. If you want to get a hard copy, there are copies available on our stand in the exhibition hall. If not, you can get it electronically from our website. But what this does is it starts to paint a picture of just why this is important and why infrastructure is important. We have the major road network that David's talked about, but that's linking things, world-class facilities like the Diamond Light synchrotron at Harwell. It's linking Silverstone. We all know this is Formula One Valley territory. What we don't understand sometimes is just how much spin-off benefit there comes from Silverstone. Something like 200 plus companies, highly specialized, high value, high tech, driven out of the network we have at Silverstone. We have Luton Airport, our own international gateway. But more importantly, and sometimes we forget this, Luton, along with Farnborough and Biggin Hill, they are the gateways for your business aviation. So your chief execs and your global chairmen who come and invest in this country, they don't fly into Heathrow. They fly in on their jet streams to Luton, to Farnborough, to Biggin Hill. That's why these airports are just as important as the big hubs as Heathrow and Gatwick. And then we have places like Alconbury, another enterprise zone, centre for low-carbon technology in the east of England. Now, what links these is the major road network, because we've got a lot of the strategic road network going north-south, coming out of London. What we haven't got is we haven't got a lot of connectivity across the Heartland area. And that's what's going to drive and help us realise that £163 billion potential for the economy. So if you look at Planning for Growth, you'll see that we've set out these connectivity. And we've quite deliberately called these corridors because this is not just about transport infrastructure, it's about digital infrastructure. And if it's about digital infrastructure, it's also about the power and the utility supplies. But when the National Infrastructure Commission says there is, and I quote them, this is not my words, this is their words, this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to create a multimodal spine linking Oxford, Milton Keynes across to Cambridge. That is an opportunity we have to realise and we have to take it quickly. But equally, feeding off that spine is going to be that major road network which links a whole network of smaller communities, smaller towns which are actually driving the economy. We're taking this forward. We've already got the Strategic Transport Forum established. And just to be clear, this is not just about policy. This is also about operations and management and resilience. Because if part of our, let's say part of Highways England's network goes down, you can always tell it's going down because of maintenance or perhaps because of an incident, because it has an impact on the local roads. So managing, working together, collaborating as a major road network is absolutely fundamental. And any of those of you who've perhaps gone along the A34 on a Friday evening when there's been an incident will know exactly what I mean about how important it is important to do that. Now, what we've set out in Planning for Growth is our 5 immediate priorities for moving forward. And I'll just sort of reflect back a little bit what the National Infrastructure Commission said yesterday, because that's a precursor for hopefully what we'll hear in the autumn statement next week. Very clearly, we want that commitment to delivering East-West Rail, and there's some recommendations from the National ties into the planning opportunities, thinking about how we can look at performance as a way of identifying investment potential for the future. And we will be lobbying off the back of the report and what we're doing at the moment to say that government needs to open the ring fence on the road tax to include a major road network. We will be putting these networks into our statutory transport strategies. So there's a mechanism and a basis for doing that moving forward. Longer term, as David and Richard have said, we're going to be moving towards a subnational transport body. Just a little bit of a plug. If you want to hear about how we're getting on with this post the conference today and also some of the work from National Infrastructure, then we will have our own mini regional version of the Highways UK at Silverstone on the 9th of March, and we'll be looking to build upon and report back on how we're moving. But as I look forward, I think the three themes I would leave with you in terms of how we take this forward are: one is the importance of strategic leadership, leadership in collaboration from the public, the private sector and the delivery partners, keeping that strategic focus. And with the major road network, we've got the opportunity to really identify and focus on what is the core network. And we've got to do it in collaboration. And as I touched on earlier, that's doing it in a slightly different way, moving on from partnerships and actually talking about collaboration. The Strategic Alliance, England's Economic Heartland, is already stepping up for that strategic leadership and providing that role. We're going to look forward to build upon what's in the major road network, think about how it relates to what we're planning for the longer term, working with the National Infrastructure Commission. And between us all, working in collaboration, let's see if we can get that 163 billion extra for the UK economy, not just for the Heartland, but for the UK economy more generally. Thank you very much.
Thanks very